I think you might be confusing it. You see, because what happens is you go to America, you get wined and dined by AAR, you come back, and the board decides to retract that tender in respect of which there were other competitors who might have been service providers to SAA Technical, and you decide to embark on the MOU with AAR. So your closeness with AAR led to a retraction of a tender in respect of which there were competitors to now form a partnership with AAR. Do you not regard that as problematic either?
Chair, it's not problematic at all.
Right, and if other competitors thought that the fact that you were in the US and being wined and dined by one of the bidders led you to cutting them out of potential supply to SAA Technical and forging a partnership with the entity that had wined and dined you, they wouldn't have any complaints of unfairness. Is that your approach?
I don't know, Chair.
Okay.
You don't know what your approach is?
I don't know if they would complain or not.
No, I'm asking whether if they complained, they would legitimately do so.
That would depend, Chair. That would be proved in the court of law as it has happened with AAR and Air France, whether it is legitimate or not.
We'll come back to the
and
litigation.
And if you don't get to a court of law,
yes,
it's fine.
Chair?
If you don't get to a court of law, it's not a problem.
It's not fine, Chair, but as SAA Technical at the time, we consider that was the best decision that we did. And in fact, as I am still sitting
Which decision now?
The decision to form a partnership with AAR, because the partnership process was embarked into, and it was agreed that we needed to form a partnership, hence the birth of the MOU.
Did you get persuaded while you were overseas at being wined and dined by AAR that the way to go would be to retract the tender and enter into an MOU with AAR? Is it something you got persuaded of when you were overseas?
Chair, I cannot
or when you came back?
I cannot be persuaded by wining and dining of AAR, Chair, because
but at what
I
point
would be in a position to wine and dine myself if I wanted to.
At what point did you see this point that the right way to go would be to retract the tender and enter into an MOU with AAR? Was it while you were visiting AAR overseas, or was it after you had returned?
Of course, the MOU, I don't know the date, but I would think the MOU would be entered after we have been there and seen the premises and seen what value can they add to SAA Technical.
So what you saw on the trip would have influenced you to saying we must go the MOU route?
Yes, Chair.
So which means it was while you were overseas on this trip that you got persuaded that you must go the MOU route?
We did not get persuaded, Chair. The purpose of our trip was to make sure that we confirm the resources that they said they had in the paper, which we liked, that this is the company that we can form a partnership with. So basically, our trip there was to make sure to confirm what was in the paper. It was not for them to persuade us. We acted in the best interest of SAA Technical to enter into that MOU, which expired after 6 months after all.
I'll let Ms. Hofmeyer ask her next question, but before that, I want to go back to the question of communication with a bidder while a tender is open. The basis on which you have now today said there would have been nothing wrong for you to go on this trip even if you were aware that AAR was one of the bidders in the tender that was still open, is that the company, that is SAA Technical, had a rigorous procurement process. So, as I understand it, you were not going to be influenced by anything because there is a rigorous procurement process. I don't remember you advancing that as the reason yesterday for saying communication between a decision maker could take place. Communication could take place between a decision maker in regard to a tender and a director of a company that has put in a bid. I thought you advanced a different basis. Am I right? Am I right in understanding that?
I may not have remembered, Chair, what basis did I advance. However, I remember me saying that there are processes including combined assurance providers, and I mentioned internal audit, external audit, risk management, and management as a whole, which basically would also form part of the chain within the procurement process.
I seem to think that at least at one stage, the basis you advanced was that as long as the communication did not include discussing the tender, there would be nothing wrong with the decision maker having communication or even having dinner or lunch with the director of a company that had put in a bid in regard to a tender that was still open. At least that was either the basis you advanced or one of them. Is that your recollection as well?
Yes, Chair. And in addition to that, there are these rigorous processes that I told you about today. And more importantly, at SAA, there is a cross-functional team, yes, which basically is responsible to make sure that the process is thorough. And in fact, you can even see their minutes that there was a process that was followed. So in addition to that cross-functional team, there is also the bid adjudication committee, and then there is EXCO. And all of these people basically are the gatekeepers of making sure that procurement processes are followed to the letter.
But we saw yesterday from your evidence how this board, of which you were a member at SAA at least, could override a decision by other people in regard to the HF's contract. You didn't even want to look at the motivation put up by the acting CEO because you had decided you were going to override them, you're going to reverse the decision. That can happen when people know they've got power. They might disregard whatever other people have said.
Chair, I said yesterday, the HF's retraction of that tender was, the circumstances were different.
Yeah, you don't have to repeat them. I remember the circumstances you gave. I was just saying, but whatever you said, what was quite clear from your evidence was that at least the SAA board of which you are a member, would not hesitate to reverse a decision made by other people within the company, and in your case would not even bother to look at the motivation for the decision that they wanted to reverse.